I've got a question here. How do I know that there is a God? Well, I've been through life up and down, inside and out, the hard way. I started off as a little kid running around London without shoes on sometimes, delivering newspapers, all kinds of stuff. And I became moderately streetwise, but I was normally shy because I looked at people on streetcars and wondered what went through their mind, what their life story was. And it started my mind thinking. And I realized that there was more to life than just getting up and going to bed. So I asked myself, how do I know that there is a God? Well, came the war in England, and I went through it. I was in the Fleet Air Arm, which is the Navy aircraft carriers, and I pretty well got up to every country in the world except China. We were on our way to the Japanese conflict in the Pacific, and peace was declared, and so they just turned the whole fleet around and sent us back home, saying, oh, I didn't want to go through that. But one of the ways I know that there is a God is the fact that I watch life and I see the grass grow. And I could work all year to my dying day and I could make a single blade of grass. So there must be a power that's much, much greater than me, up there commanding it all, making things happen. And then I look at the birds and wonder how they fly, and so on. Again, another great power behind all that. Then I look at people. As they used to say in architecture, there's nothing wrong with this building until you put people in it. Very, very true, because everybody can find fault with something, somewhere, sometime. And then I look at the great expanse of the ocean. Where did all this fabulous, mighty load of water come from? Some say the planet, the collisions from asteroids or something brought the water, I don't know. But in the Bible it said that God created the deep, and so now we see through a glass darkly. We don't understand everything because I don't really know where the water came to make the seas and divide the lands and all that. Anyway, it happened. Then, of course, there's the mighty universe, which is just beyond comprehension. It's out there. And then all of that combined together affects all of our souls. We have a soul. And life is much to do with the soul. The brain and the soul pretty well command things, provided you don't get drunk every night. Well, then I went through the Second World War, and the war finished, and I was discharged in April of 1946. And there was no work anywhere. England was a total wreck. I mean, London there wasn't hardly a building standing. And of course there was no clothing, no food, nothing. You had to really scramble. So I said to myself in my good old pre-war days, to heck with this. So we got 9 other people together. We advertised it in the paper. We got 9 people together to contribute. I think it was £350, which is about $750 now. Each, of course, money was worth a lot more in those days. And we all pooled our money, and we bought an army truck, which had been reconditioned and surplus sales. We got it for a very, very cheap price. And they'd serviced it. It had new tires on it. It had, the engine was cleaned up and overhauled. It ran like a top. So we thought, well, this might be the thing to take us across to some place where there wasn't so much depression and oppression and not a lot of hope. So we looked around at the map, and all the planes and ships and everything else, transportation of any kind, was all booked up to come to America, because America was a good place and a lot of people want to come here. And all the ships and planes were all booked up for a year ahead. So we thought, well, how can we get out of this mess? So we decided to drive this truck down through France, well, to Dover, and then ship it across to France, which was quite a task. And then drive right down through France, down to Marseille, which is in the southern warm part of the Mediterranean. Then ship it across the Mediterranean again on a freighter to Oran, which is in North Africa. And then we had to drive from Oran to Algiers, which is about 200 miles, across the Atlas Mountains. That road is the worst road I think I've ever driven on, because there's the sea down there. Up here's a road going around the cliff. Just mountain, road, mountain, sea. And we did it at night time because of our schedule. We were 2 weeks behind schedule. And if you don't get into the Sahara Desert by about early April, you ain't going to make it, because the heat is absolutely intolerable. So we had to save up as much time as we could, so we drove at night across the Atlas Mountains, and I picked up a rock about this. We came on the road, took a bend like that, and the headlights just shone out into nothing. So we weren't going to drive on. So we got out of the truck, and I picked up a rock about this size and threw it over. I never heard it hit the bottom. We were high up. And it was nighttime. It's not a pleasant thing to be. Situation. When we got, excuse me, when we got to Algiers, we had to join about 660 parties of people trying to do the same thing. Can you imagine? Not just 660 people, 660 parties. They were 4 to 6 people in a party. And they had all kinds of transportation, all hoping to cross the Sahara Desert and get down to South Africa, because that's where there was some sort of living and prosperity. And the French would not let us go into the desert, because 15 people had been killed up until prior to us getting there, because they loaded these 50-gallon gasoline drums of gas, and they loaded them full up. When they got into the hot sunlight, the gas expanded and exploded. And the next thing you know, you had a fire, and there was 15 people killed. So the French, who were handling that part of the world at that time, refused to let anybody go. So all these people were hanging around here in Algiers wondering what to do. And a lot of them just packed up and went back to England. But we were determined to go through. So to cut a very long story short, we spent a couple of weeks in Algiers trying to figure out a way to get across into the desert. And once we were in the desert, nobody knew we were there. We were there without authority. If we broke down, that was it. So we met a guy who, during the war, had been stealing trucks from the Navy, from the Army, breaking them down and selling the parts back to the Army, you know, real racketeering deal. And this guy was a real nefarious type of guy. You know, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. He had lead weights on his feet. Anyway, we tried to make a friend of him. And I think we did. And in order to get by with the terrific heat in the desert, we had to have a condenser rig on the front. Nobody else had that. And the engines were overheating. So they fixed us up with this condenser tour, which they called it in French. And then he led us across the Atlas Mountain. We drove our truck up, dried up riverbeds. And you talk about a bumpy ride. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, we got above this pass, and we looked back, and 15 miles away was the bright lights of Algiers. Never forget that in all my life. Because there was a deciding point. We were faced with a desert. We didn't know what was desert because there was landmines and old tanks and all that, and they just fought a war in there. So anyway, he got us down out of the mountain, and when we got to the bottom, he just opened the door, opened the cab door, got out of the cab, turned around and walked all the way back to Algiers. That's about probably 30, 40 miles. So we started, it took us 3.5 weeks to drive through the Sahara Desert. And the book I've got down there, which is just a transcript of the original book, it's got a map in it, and it shows where we went down through these different towns. We finally got to Kano in northern Nigeria. And we saw the guys cutting out planks of wood, and this is mahogany wood that they brought in, great big tree logs, and they, two-man saw, cutting dead straight, and they cut out 2x12s and all these great long timbers for building. And the skills, this was something new to us, you see. And then coming through the Sahara Desert, we came across all kinds of French army forts and people, and there was no roads across there. And the sand was so soft that the tires, sometimes one day we only made 11 miles because we had sand mats, that steel, pieces of steel that you stick on those front tires, drive over them, pick them up again and put them down. We had to proceed that way because the sand is absolutely just like hourglass sand. It's very hard, tremendously hot. We met a party halfway, 2/3 of the way through the desert, that had a German truck. It was a Mercedes-Benz, and Mercedes made good trucks. They were in the truck business during the war. And this truck had got stuck in the soft sand. And there's we learned later that there's 3 Germans in there, and one English guy called Terry Tadman, who had bummed a ride from Algiers with them to go into the desert. Well, this truck had got stuck in there and been there for 2 or 3 weeks when we got there. And the crankshaft of the engine had snapped because of the tremendous trying to get out of the sand. So they had to live by the truck with nothing else. And they drunk all the water out of the radiator, and they dumped, which nearly killed them, I would imagine. And they'd even scraped some of the grease and the oil off underneath the truck in order to try and survive. 2 of them were dead. We never found the 3rd guy. And Terry Tadman, we found 20 miles down the road where we were going. And his lips were about that thick, and he was moments away from death. We put on his lips a mixture of olive oil and rum. And it softened him down, and he survived, and he came down with us all the way down into South Africa. So we suffered all that, and I went as far as the copper mines at Kitwe and Changa, and worked on the copper mines for 6 months, because the truck was flat wore out. I mean, it was completely ruined, because we went through the jungle as well, you know, Congo. But that brought about a certain form of accountability to me, qualities like leadership, endurance, all that kind of stuff. Stuff that they teach the soldiers now who go fighting in Afghanistan. They're highly trained and they're skilled in all these things. Well, I learned that the hard way. So I ask people today, when I see them, and especially young people, I say, what really motivates you? What sets you abuzz? What gives you something that you want to do? And because we wanted to do something, and we did it. We didn't know what the cost of it was, or the price we'd have to pay, or anything. It's a hefty price, I'll tell you, when we finally got down. We were just like ragamuffins. Our clothes were all shot and torn up. It was a terrible mess. Nobody had a haircut or a shave, or couldn't shave. We just like a couple of vagabonds. But it brings out another quality. And I humbly say, I'm proud of this, because it makes you a leader. Now there's something that the young people, and I do address the younger people and the older, everyone, because we all can learn this lesson. Leadership will get you a long way, and it'll get you organized. So everyone really in their hearts can be a leader. There's many, many thousands of things you can be a leader at. But some of the qualities of leadership are this. First things first. Now the first things first in your life should be Jesus Christ. It should be God who created the birds and the grass and the humans and the brains and the universe and our soul. And if you get that organized, if you think about it, then you have to prepare. You have to get yourself, as you grow up, you have to prepare yourself and face things in life and reason with them and think about it. And don't be lazy. And you have to get organized. Then you have to tell the truth and be accountable, because there's great strength in truth. There's nothing stronger than truth, and that's the Bible is true. If it wasn't true, we'd have heard about it. It wouldn't have been published today. If Jesus hadn't died for us, there would be no record of it today, because it would have just been another guy who got crucified. But when we think why Jesus came and what God was in God's mind, and we can't really know the mind of God too well, but he figured it out and sent a man, Jesus Christ, and thank God he did. Another thing that when you want to learn responsibility and leadership in life is don't mix with the rabble. Get with good people. Always look up. My father used to say to me, and I've never forgot this, never, always mix with people that can help you. I don't mean sponge on them that way. I mean that you can learn from. In other words, life is a learning process. And then after you've done all that, reflect. And think about it. And assess where you're going. What happened. Don't just flop into bed and go to sleep. Now, don't be worried about it. I want to tell you something about worry. The moment that you take one step this way, that way, or remove your hat, or take your coat off, that's not worry anymore. It's planning. You see how we get organized? This is what makes leaders. This is what puts people in corporate positions. And because you would say, wow, he's the boss. How did he get to be the boss? Because he was responsible. And he learned something about life. You know, he just didn't sit on his duff and eat French fries all day. And then you have to believe, after all that, you have to believe in yourself. I was very, very shy. It was very, very hard for me to believe in myself. I guarantee you that. But after that desert trip and going through the war in the Navy, I guarantee you I started to believe myself because I had to be self-reliant. I had to have something about me, and I had to stick up to the bullies and just eat it sometimes because there's no other way out, you know. Excuse me, I've got to get a room tonight. And then, if you develop strong beliefs, and by doing this, and also another good thing is to under-promise and over-produce. Then you've got character. People say, oh, reliable guy. I like him. Where did he come from, you know? So these are some of the things I've learned, and I just pass them along with the grace of God. And after all that, you can be your own person. You can have something, you can have prosperity, you can have good friends because they see something good in you. Where did this goodness come from? It came from originally from the Ten Commandments that God gave us. Because we don't really know the depth and width and breadth and height and all that of God's love for us. But God, in His way, He loves us. And He's there all the time, never changes. Now here's something else. After you've done all that, those are peripheral things compared with the fact that you have to study. You've got to train the brain. Remember that. Then after all that, you can begin to organize. Now I'm not trying to talk down to you. I'm giving you the benefit of the problems I had. I was not organized. My handwriting used to be like this all over the place. When I was in the Australian Air Force for 3 years. Some guy said to me, he said, if you make your handwriting exactly square and this way, it'll change your life. And so, this is how I write now, 100% straight. I did a lot of work in architecture, and so that also trains you. But it helps you get organized, because as an architect, if you make a mistake, they're going to sue you. Believe me. All right. I think after you've worked your character up to be a real good guy or a good gal, you need to cherish that. It's absolutely precious, because it's the gift of God to you. Only the message of God comes into your soul and tells you to study and be responsible and tell the truth and all that stuff. And after all that, what do? You can smile. Simple word, smile. There it is, not that. Because without a smile, people think they can't figure you out unless you smile. And a smile covers a million other things. I think a smile is absolutely wonderful. Before I came to America, British people don't smile a lot. In London, they're very dour and they're serious about a lot of stuff. And my dad used to say to me, yeah, you talk too much. But he didn't know what was going through my mind. I was still trying to communicate and smile. And I think the absolute essential thing about getting you through the Sahara Desert and down through South Africa and a place to live and work, and find a good meal and a good paycheck, is I had to figure out, I had to believe in God, and I had to believe in Jesus Christ. My grandmother took me to a little Baptist church when I was about 7. And that was the very first time I ever heard about Jesus. My father and mother were not religious people. My mother was very dour, hard to get along with, but a good woman, but still never talked to me about Jesus. When I found Jesus in the Sahara Desert, we were lost, and I prayed, and we found our way out. I'll never, ever forget that. It'll give you much less stress. And stress is what kills us today. The way we live today, everything's souped up and super fast, and you've got to have it now or yesterday. But if you can relax and just talk to God, talk to Jesus, like I do, like Joyce does, like Phyllis does, like we do in our studio, that we're going to help the young people, which is a good thing, you'll find that you can feel a lot stronger. And it'll give you that tremendous sense of accomplishment and leadership. Can you imagine a world without Jesus Christ? Can you imagine that? That's what we're coming to, pretty well. When the rapture happens, we won't be here. And so all the people who didn't believe in Jesus will have to stay here and fight it out amongst themselves. That'll be a terrible thing. I don't want to see that. But we're getting close towards that because people have short memories, short tempers. They have, it's the me generation. And it's not satisfactory. It's not the Christian way. The Christian way will give you peace. And Jesus said, "The peace I leave with you," and, so on and so forth. But all of this is really nothing more than just straightforward common sense. But sometimes you have to have somebody who's been through the mill a bit, who can tell you what you need to hear. You need to study and not get overly demonstrative about it or whatever, but just quietly and calmly take it all in. The words of Jesus in the Bible and what Paul said, and Genesis, and Moses running through how God spoke to Moses. Joyce and I are reading every day. We read a chapter of the Bible every day and pray. I don't brag about that untowardly. It's worth while. But we're hearing what God's saying to Moses. And I said to Joyce this morning, it's hard to figure out why God said all this stuff to Moses because of the tremendous load of stuff in regulations and stuff about the temple that he gave him and all that stuff. But they had nothing else to do but to follow what God was saying at that time, because they just come out of Egypt and they had nowhere else to go. And the whole mess of enemies out in front of them. They had to capture these lands and occupy them, which they did. Well, I just want to end up by saying that I'm so thankful, I'm 92, that my brain is still good because I've been creative, I've exercised my brain, I'm always doing something constructive to help someone. The reason I play my horn up here is to help you all. I found a tape today, which I made a tape of. In 1993, we played at the Gold Creek Country Club with my band. And I couldn't believe it. I was looking at this tape and, my goodness, I was playing good. And so it brings about that sort of content. And it also develops character. And we'll be prosperous and we'll have a lot of really good Christian